Hey guys, tonight we slip into the steamy emerald heart of Cambodia's rainforests, where the Khmer Empire's lost cities hide beneath a tangle of vines and secrets. Picture yourself trudging through dense jungle, the air heavy with damp earth and orchid perfume, while cicadas hum a lullaby older than your great-grandma's bedtime stories. You're chasing Angkor and its forgotten cousin cities that once dazzled a million people but now play hide and seek with the trees. Spoiler, you probably won't survive a day without GPS, let alone dodge the snakes slithering through these ruins. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I'm curious where you're drifting off from tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You push through the undergrowth, your sandals sinking into mud that clings like it's got a personal grudge. It's the 9th century, and the Khmer Empire is flexing building cities that make your local strip mall look like a sandcastle after high tide. Angkor, the crown jewel, isn't just one temple. It's a massive web of stone water and ambition home to nearly 1 million souls at its peak. Mainstream history confirms it. Angkor was the largest pre-industrial city on Earth, outsizing medieval Europe's biggest towns like they were quaint villages. You hear the distant clink of chisels and the chatter of merchants haggling over rice. The air's so humid, your lungs are practically doing yoga, and a monkey screeches overhead, probably laughing at your sweaty struggle. Here's a quirky tidbit. The Khmer didn't just build for gods. They built to one-up each other, each king stacking stones like it was an ancient social media contest for divine bragging rights. You pause, wiping your brow as a fern brushes your arm like a nosy neighbor. The rainforest isn't just a backdrop. It's the engine of these cities. The Khmer carved out rice fields and reservoirs from this green chaos, leaving offerings to forest spirits to keep the balance. Historians still argue whether these rituals were heartfelt devotion or just clever propaganda to keep workers in line. You spot a stone face peeking through the moss, its half smile saying good luck keeping up with us. The jungle hums with lifebirds' bugs, and the occasional rustle that makes you wonder if you're lunch. You're not lost yet, but the forest has a way of making you feel small, like you're trespassing in its kingdom. The Khmer knew this place was alive, weaving its rhythms into their myths and temples. You step over a root, hoping it's not a snake, and catch a whiff of damp stone and mystery. Your path twists deeper, pulling you toward Angkor's beating heart. The trees part slightly, revealing a glimpse of a crumbling tower in the distance, its silhouette soft against the dawn. You're not just walking through a jungle. You're in a living machine one the Khmer mastered to feed their empire. Every canal, every rice paddy, every temple was a bet against nature's chaos, and for centuries they won. You hear water trickling nearby, a reminder of the canals you'll soon explore. A butterfly the size of your hand flutters past, and you're half sure it's showing off. You smirk, imagining it posing for an ancient Khmer selfie. The trail ahead is muddy, the air thick, but the promise of lost cities keeps you moving. You're in deep now, and the jungle's not letting you go without a story. You're standing in the shadow of Angkor Wat now, its 5 lotus bud towers piercing the dawn sky like stone sentinels. It's the 12th century, and King Suryavarman II is pouring his heart and his kingdom's coffers into the sprawling temple, a monument to Vishnu and his own ego. Mainstream history calls Angkor Wat a Hindu masterpiece built in roughly 30 years, faster than Europe's sluggish cathedrals. You run your fingers over warm sandstone, tracing carvings of Apsara dancers, so lifelike they seem ready to twirl off the wall. The place is massive, sprawling over 500 acres, and you dodge priests muttering Sanskrit while ox carts creak past loaded with rice sacks. Here's the quirky bit. Some carvings show what look like dinosaurs, stegosaurus-like critters etched centuries before anyone dug up a fossil. You grin picturing a Khmer artist doodling a weird lizard after a long day. Historians still argue whether these carvings hint at ancient knowledge or just creative flair gone wild. You keep walking, the sun baking your back, and notice the temple's moat wide enough to make you wonder if they expected pirate invasions. It's not just for show. Angkor's water system kept the city alive through brutal dry seasons. You hear kids splashing nearby, probably sneaking a swim when the priests aren't looking. The air smells of incense and wet stone, and you're half convinced you'll trip over a sacred cow. Suryavarman's ghost is probably smirking, watching you gawk at his masterpiece. You step into a shaded gallery where the stone feels cool underfoot and marvel at the bas-reliefs stretching for miles, scenes of battles, gods and myths that make your history textbook look like a pamphlet. A monk glides by his orange robe, a splash of color against the gray stone, and you wonder what he's praying for. The temple buzzes with life merchants, hawkfish paste, dancers practice for rituals, and you're trying not to step on anyone's toes, literally or figuratively. You spot a carving of a chariot race, so detailed you can almost hear the horse's hooves. It's easy to forget this place was a city, not just a temple, with neighborhoods, markets, and traffic jams of ox carts. You're sweating buckets now, the humidity wrapping you like a damp blanket. A stray dog naps in a corner, looking more relaxed than you'll ever be. You chuckle, thinking it's probably the reincarnation of some overworked Khmer bureaucrat. The moat glitters in the distance, a reminder of the canals that kept this empire humming. You're tempted to sit and fan yourself, but the temple's grandeur pulls you deeper, each step a dip into a world where gods and kings played on the same stage. The jungle hums around you, its birds and bugs, adding a soundtrack that's been playing for centuries. You're just a visitor here, but Angkor Wat makes you feel like you're part of something eternal. You're lost, or at least you feel like it, as the jungle thickens and spits you out at Khmer, a city that's a ghost of its former self. It's the 10th century, and for a brief 20 years, this was the Khmer capital, a bold move by King Jayavarman IV to break away from Angkor's shadow. Mainstream history paints Khmer as a short-lived experiment, 60 miles northeast of Angkor, with over 80 temples scattered across the forest. You're standing at the base of Prasat Tom, a 7-tiered pyramid that looks like it wandered in from a Mayan film set. The steps are steep, and you're not climbing them without a serious pep talk or a nap. Here's the quirky tidbit. Locals swear a massive linga statue was hauled to the pyramid's top without pulleys, just raw muscle and prayers to Shiva. You smirk, imagining workers muttering curses to Shiva as they heaved. Historians still argue whether Khmer was a rebellious power grab or a king throwing a geographic tantrum. You wander past crumbling shrines, their stones scattered like a giant's dropped puzzle. The jungle's eerily quiet here, as if it's holding its breath, and the air smells of moss and forgotten dreams. You spot a faded carving of Garuda the bird god, his wings spread like he's about to judge your hiking skills. A lizard darts across your path, and you jump. City instincts aren't much use out here. The pyramid looms, its laterite blocks worn but defiant, and you can almost hear the echoes of Jayavarman's court planning their brief moment of glory. You're starting to feel like an intruder stumbling through a city that didn't last, but refuses to vanish. You push deeper vines, snagging at your clothes like they're trying to keep you here. Khmer's temples are rougher than Angkor's, built fast to prove a point, but their rawness has a charm. You find a broken statue, its face half buried in roots, smiling like it knows something you don't. The jungles reclaimed most of this place, wrapping stones and strangler figs that look like they're hugging too tight. You chuckle, thinking the trees are probably pettier than Jayavarman's rivals. A faint breeze carries the scent of damp stone, and you spot a small shrine, its doorway choked with greenery. The Khmer built this city to defy Angkor, but the jungle had other plans, swallowing it whole. You're tempted to sit and soak in the stillness, but the path pulls you forward, promising more ruins and more secrets. Your sandals crunch on loose gravel, and you're starting to wonder if Kokur's laughing at you, a fleeting capital that still demands respect. The jungle's watching, and you're not sure if you're a guest or a trespasser. You're deep in the rainforest now, where the air wraps you like a warm, wet towel, and every step squelches in the muddy earth. It's the Khmer Empire at its zenith, and this jungle isn't just a pretty backdrop, it's the heartbeat of their cities. Mainstream history credits the Khmer with mastering this green chaos, carving out rice fields and reservoirs while leaving offerings to appease forest spirits. You're slogging along a trail with ferns brushing your legs like they're trying to start a conversation. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some trees were married in rituals to ensure bountiful harvests. Imagine a priest tying the knot for a fig tree and its leafy soulmate. You snicker, picturing the awkward vows between bark and branch. Historians still argue whether these ceremonies were spiritual glue or just royal PR to keep farmers motivated. You pause by a stream, its water glinting like polished jade, and hear a distant thunder rumbling like the jungle's got a grudge. This rainforest fed Angkor's sprawl, its monsoons filling canals, while roots held the soil together. You spot a butterfly the size of your hand, its wings flashing colors that make your phone's screen look dull. You're half sure it's flexing for you, and you mutter, "Show off." The Khmer wove this forest into their myths, believing spirits guarded every tree and stream. You're not just hiking, you're in a living system as intricate as any city grid, only with more bugs. You step over a root, hoping it's not a snake in disguise, and catch the scent of damp moss and orchids. The jungle's alive, buzzing with birds and the occasional rustle that makes you freeze. Probably just a monkey, but your city brain screams tiger. The Khmer knew how to work with this chaos, clearing just enough to plant rice while leaving the forest spirits happy. You pass a small shrine, its stones worn but still standing, likely a spot where farmers left rice cakes for luck. You're tempted to sit and catch your breath, but the trail pulls you deeper, promising glimpses of temples hidden in the green. A bead of sweat rolls down your neck, and you chuckle, thinking the jungle's probably betting you'll give up. Spoiler, you're too stubborn for that. The air's thick, the path muddy, but the rainforest's pulse keeps you moving, whispering of the cities it once cradled. You're weaving through the ruins of Bante Chmar now, where the jungle's locked in a slow-motion tug-of-war with crumbling stone. It's the late 12th century, and this temple city, built by King Jayavarman VII, hums with the echoes of monks chanting and markets buzzing. Mainstream history marks Bante Chmar as a Buddhist powerhouse, its walls etched with epic battles and serene Buddhas that make your local art gallery look like a doodle pad. You duck under a vine, thicker than your arm, tracing a bas-relief of a warrior wielding a spear. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some carvings show fish so detailed you'd swear the artists moonlighted as fishermen sketching every scale during lunch breaks. You grin, imagining a monk sneaking fish drawings into sacred art. Historians still argue whether Bante Chmar was a spiritual haven or just Jayavarman flexing his piety to impress the masses. The air smells of wet stone and decay, and you're dodging roots that seem to shift when you blink. The temple's towers lean like tired old giants, half choked by strangler figs that wrap them like clingy X's. You hear a rustle, probably a monkey, but your imagination whispers leopard making you step faster. The Khmer built this place to defy time, but the jungle's got a long memory and longer roots. You find a quiet corner where a stone Buddha smiles serene despite the chaos, and you wonder what secrets it's keeping. The humidity's got your shirt sticking to you like a second skin, and you mutter nice one jungle as a bead of sweat stings your eye. You wander deeper the path, narrowing as vines claw at the stones. Bante Chamar feels alive its carvings, telling stories of gods and kings, while the forest hums its own tune. You spot a fallen lintel, its lotus motif cracked but stubborn, and picture the artisans who carved it sweating as much as you are. A distant bird squawks, sounding like it's critiquing your navigation skills, and you chuckle fair point. The temple's grandeur is fading, but its bones still command respect, whispering of a time when this was the heart of a bustling city. You're tempted to sit and let the silence sink in, but the ruins keep pulling you forward each step, a brush with a world the jungle's trying to erase. Your sandals are caked in mud now, and you're starting to feel like an uninvited guest. But Bante Chamar's story isn't done with you yet. You're gliding along one of Angkor's canals, the water smooth as a mirror under your borrowed wooden boat. It's the 12th century, and these waterways are the Khmer Empire's arteries, ferrying rice fish and gossip across a city that dwarfs modern urban sprawls. Mainstream history praises the Khmer's hydraulic genius canals and massive reservoirs that fed 1 million people, making Europe's medieval plumbing look like a leaky bucket. You paddle past farmers balancing baskets on ox carts, their chatter blending with the soft lap of water against your boat. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some canals were lined with laterite stones so precisely cut they fit together without mortar, like the world's heaviest Lego set. You smirk, imagining a Khmer engineer cursing when a stone didn't slide in perfectly. Historians still argue whether this water system was over-engineered, tempting collapse with its complexity. You pass a kid fishing with a bamboo pole, his bored expression a dead ringer for every teenager you've ever seen. The canal reflects the sky, turning it into a golden ribbon that stretches toward Angkor Wat's distant towers. You're tempted to dip your hand in, but a ripple crocodile or just a fat fish makes you think twice. The Khmer didn't just build canals, they tamed the rainforest's pulse, channeling monsoons to keep their empire humming. You spot a lotus picker, her hands deftly plucking blooms for temple offerings, and wonder if she ever dreamed of sailing these waters to somewhere new. The air smells of mud and faint jasmine, and your boat rocks gently lulling you into the rhythm of the city. You drift past a stone landing, where merchants unload jars of fermented fish paste. Yep, it smells as bad as you'd expect. You wrinkle your nose, but to the Khmer, this stuff was gold, flavoring everything from royal feasts to farmers' lunches. A heron swoops low, skimming the water, and you chuckle, thinking it's probably the only one here not impressed by Angkor's grandeur. The canal banks are alive with activity, women washing clothes, kids splashing, and a monk rinsing his robe with a look of pure zen. You're starting to get why water was the Khmer's obsession. It's not just survival, it's power carved into the earth. The sun's climbing and warming your back, and you're tempted to nap right here in the boat, but the canal pulls you deeper into the city's veins. You pass a small shrine on the bank, its stone worn, but adorned with fresh flowers, likely a spot for boatmen to leave offerings. The jungle hums in the distance, a reminder that this water system is just borrowed from nature's grip. You're in the heart of Angkor now, and the story's only getting started. You're crouched beside a Khmer artisan, his chisel tapping a sandstone block with the steady rhythm of a heartbeat. It's the 11th century, and Angkor's temples are rising, each one a canvas for gods, kings, and stories meant to outlast time. Mainstream history says these carvings, Apsaras dancing nagas, slithering battles, raging, were as much propaganda as art, selling the king's divine right to anyone who'd listen. You watch the artisan's hands steady. Despite the heat carving a goddess so detailed, you half expect her to wink. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some carvers hid tiny mistakes in their work, like a wonky lotus, or a lopsided smile maybe to keep the gods humble, or just to mess with future archaeologists. You grin imagining a sculptor chuckling over his secret prank. Historians still argue whether these carvings were purely devotional or a way to flex royal power to the masses. You're surrounded by the clink of tools and the hum of workers, the air thick with stone dust and the scent of burning incense. You step back, dodging a chip of sandstone that flies past like a rogue pebble, and notice the artisan's focus eyes locked on the stone like it's whispering back. The temple wall stretches endlessly, a comic strip of myths and victories, and you're tempted to trace every line, but your fingers are already gritty. A stray dog naps nearby, sprawled in the shade like it owns the place, and you mutter, "Lucky mutt," wishing you could join it. You wander along the half-finished wall, where apsaras seem to dance in the flickering sunlight. The Khmer believed these carvings held power, linking the earthly city to the heavens. You spot a relief of a battle, with elephants trampling enemies, and wonder if the carvers ever saw such chaos, or just imagined it from royal tales. The jungle's hum seeps through birds and bugs, adding a soundtrack that's been playing for centuries. You're starting to feel the weight of this place, not just the stones, but the ambition behind them. A worker nearby pauses to sip rice wine from a clay jug, offering you a sip with a grin. You decline mostly because you're not sure your stomach's ready for ancient happy hour. The temple's growing before your eyes. Each chisel strikes a step toward eternity, but the jungle's watching patient as ever. You step over a pile of stone chips, your sandals crunching, and head deeper into the construction chaos, drawn by the promise of more stories carved in stone. You're standing in the eerie quiet of Khmer, the jungle's green grip tightening around you as you explore this forgotten capital. It's the 10th century, and for a fleeting 20 years, King Jayavarman IV made this place the Khmer Empire's heart, a bold middle finger to Angkor's establishment. Mainstream history calls Khmer a short-lived capital home to over 80 temples, with Prasatam's 7-tiered pyramids stealing the show. You're at its base, staring up at steps so steep you'd need a motivational speech to climb them. Here's the quirky tidbit. Locals swear a massive linga statue was hauled to the top, using nothing but rope sweat and prayers, no pulleys, just pure grit. You smirk, picturing workers muttering curses to Shiva as they heaved. Historians still argue whether Khmer was a rebellious power grab or a king's vanity project gone rogue. The air smells of moss and earth, and the jungle's silence feels heavy, broken only by a distant bird call that sounds like it's mocking your muddy sandals. You wander past smaller shrines, their stones scattered like a giant's dropped toys, and spot a carving of Garuda, the bird god. His wings faded but fierce. A lizard skitters across your path, and you flinch. City instincts aren't much use out here. The pyramid's shadow stretches long, and you can almost hear the echoes of Jayavarman's court, planning their brief moment of glory. You're starting to feel like an intruder, stumbling through a city that didn't last, but refuses to vanish. You push deeper vines, snagging at your clothes like they're trying to keep you here. Khmer's temples are rougher than Angkor's, built fast to prove a point, but their rawness has a charm. You find a broken statue, its face half buried in roots, smiling like it knows something you don't. The jungle's reclaimed most of this place, wrapping stones in strangler figs that look like they're hugging too tight. You chuckle, thinking the trees are probably pettier than Jayavarman's rivals. A faint breeze carries the scent of damp stone, and you spot a small shrine its doorway choked with greenery. The Khmer built this city to defy Angkor, but the jungle had other plans, swallowing it whole. You're tempted to sit and soak in the stillness, but the path pulls you forward, promising more ruins and more secrets. Your sandals crunch on loose gravel, and you're starting to wonder if Kokir's laughing at you, a fleeting capital that still demands respect. The jungle's watching, and you're not sure if you're a guest or a trespasser. You're trudging through the rainforest now, the air so thick with humidity, it feels like you're breathing soup. It's the height of the Khmer Empire, and the monsoon's grip is tightening, turning paths into muddy rivers, and the jungle into a force of nature you can't ignore. Mainstream history says the Khmer thrived because they mastered these seasonal floods, channeling water into canals and reservoirs to keep their cities alive. You're sloshing along a trail, your sandals making squelching noises that would embarrass you back home. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some Khmer farmers tied bells to water buffalo to track them during floods, creating a jingly soundtrack that probably annoyed the neighbors. You chuckle imagining a buffalo strutting like it's auditioning for a jungle orchestra. Historians still argue whether the Khmer's water management was genius or a gamble that overreached. You pause by a swollen stream, its current fast enough to make you rethink wading across. The rainforest's pulse is everywhere. Rain patters on leaves, frogs croak like they're gossiping, and the air smells of wet earth and something faintly sweet, maybe wild orchids. The Khmer built their empire around these monsoons, using them to flood rice fields while praying to spirits to keep the deluge in check. You spot a small stone marker, likely a shrine for offerings to appease the rain gods, and wonder if it worked or if they just got lucky. A monkey swings overhead, chattering like it's critiquing your soggy appearance, and you mutter, "Easy for you to say, buddy." You keep moving the trail slick underfoot, and notice how the jungle seems to breathe with the rain. The Khmer didn't fight this forest. They danced with it, timing their planting and building to the monsoon's rhythm. You pass a cluster of rice paddies, half submerged, where farmers are probably cursing the mud as much as you are. The water's a murky mirror, reflecting twisted trees and a sky heavy with clouds. You're tempted to stop and wring out your clothes, but the path pulls you deeper toward the faint outline of a temple in the distance. The monsoon's power is humbling, making Angkor's canals and reservoirs seem like miracles of human stubbornness. You step over a root, hoping it's not a snake, and catch a whiff of damp moss. The jungle's alive, and you're just a guest stumbling through a world where water rules, and the Khmer learned to bow to it. Your sandals are basically mud pancakes now, but the story's too good to turn back. You're standing in the flickering torchlight of an Angkor temple, the air heavy with incense and the low hum of sacred chants. It's the 12th century, and priests are leading rituals that bind the Khmer Empire to its gods, their voices weaving through the night like a lullaby for the heavens. Mainstream history says these ceremonies, often Hindu or Buddhist, were the spiritual glue of Angkor, tying kings to divine power and people to their faith. You're watching a priest pour rice wine over a stone linga, his movements slow and deliberate as dancers in golden headdresses sway to the beat of drums. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some priests kept sacred turtles in temple ponds, believing their slow waddle predicted divine favor. Imagine betting your harvest on a turtle's mood swing. You smirk, picturing a priest anxiously watching a turtle nap. Historians still argue whether these rituals were heartfelt devotion or royal propaganda to keep the masses in line. You step closer, the stone floor cool under your bare feet, and catch the scent of sandalwood and lotus blooms. The temple's walls glow with carvings of gods and myths lit by torches that cast dancing shadows. You're dodging a small crowd of worshippers, their murmurs blending with the distant croak of frogs. A young acolyte hands you a lotus flower, probably mistaking you for someone important, and you fumble a thank you feeling like you're crashing a cosmic party. The air's warm, almost suffocating, but the chant's rhythm is soothing, pulling you into its trance. You wander toward a side chamber where a statue of Vishnu looms its multiple arms, frozen in a gesture of eternal calm. The Khmer believed these rituals kept the universe spinning, and you're starting to see why there's a weight to this place, like the gods are actually listening. A bat flits overhead, and you duck, muttering, "Nice aim, buddy." You chuckle, but the temple's gravity pulls you back in. The priests move to a new chant, their voices rising like a tide, and you notice offerings piled high rice fruit and woven cloth. It's a reminder that this wasn't just a show, it fed the city's soul. You're tempted to sit cross-legged and soak it in, but the ceremony's energy keeps you moving, drawn deeper into the temple's heart. The jungle hums outside a faint echo of the rainforest you trudged through earlier, and you realize this place is a bridge between earth and sky, mud and miracles. Your sandals are still damp from the trail, but here under the starlit stone, you're part of something bigger. You're wandering through the sprawling ruins of Preah Khan, Jayavarman VII's ambitious masterpiece, where the air feels thick with the weight of forgotten dreams. It's the late 12th century, and this temple complex, built to honor the king's father, hums with Buddhist monks and royal attendants, though now it's half claimed by the jungle. Mainstream history calls Preah Khan a university temple and city rolled into one, housing thousands of monks and dancers in its prime. You step over a fallen lintel, its carvings of apsaras faded but graceful, and dodge a root that's trying to trip you like a jealous rival. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some doorways here are so narrow, priests had to sidestep through them possibly to keep out uninvited spirits, or just to make everyone look ridiculous. You grin, imagining a monk shimmying sideways with a straight face. Historians still argue whether Preah Khan was a spiritual hub or a political flex to cement Jayavarman's Buddhist legacy. The air smells of damp stone and wildflowers, and you hear the distant chirp of birds blending with the creak of strangler figs, tightening their grip on the walls. You're navigating a maze of corridors, each turn revealing a new courtyard or a statue with a serene, knowing smile. A monkey swings overhead, dropping a twig that narrowly misses you, and you mutter, "Nice shot, pal." The temple's grandeur is crumbling stones, lean like they're tired, and moss carpets the floors, but you can still feel its pulse, the echo of 1,000 prayers. You spot a broken Buddha statue, its hand raised in blessing and wonder. What stories it heard from the monks who once lived here. You keep moving the path, twisting through galleries, where sunlight filters through cracks, painting the stones gold. Preah Khan was Jayavarman's love letter to his faith, but it's fragile now, like a sandcastle facing the tide. You pass a small shrine, its offerings long gone, and picture the dancers who once filled these halls, their ankle bells jingling. The jungle's creeping in roots, wrapping columns like they're claiming custody. You chuckle, thinking the trees are probably more possessive than Jayavarman's court. The air's heavy, your sandals gritty with dust, and you're tempted to sit and let the silence sink in, but the ruins keep pulling you forward. The canals and paddies you saw earlier tie this place to the empire's heartbeat. You step carefully, avoiding a loose stone, and head deeper into Preah Khan's crumbling wonder caught in its spell. You're creeping through the ruins of Beng Milia, where the jungle's grip is so tight it feels like the stones are gasping. It's the 12th century, and this temple, once a jewel of the Khmer Empire, now lies in glorious disarray, its halls swallowed by roots and time. Mainstream history suggests Beng Milia was a prototype for Angkor Wat, built around the same time with similar grand designs, but left to fend for itself against the rainforest. You clamber over a collapsed wall, your hands brushing mossy stones that feel cool despite the humidity. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some locals believe the temple stones were cursed to crumble faster, as if the gods got jealous of its beauty. You smirk, picturing a deity throwing a cosmic tantrum over architecture. Historians still argue whether Bang Milia's ruin was neglect or nature's sheer stubbornness winning out. The air smells of wet stone and decay, and you hear the faint drip of water echoing in a shadowed corridor. Strangler figs wrap the ruins like a possessive hug, their roots cracking columns with a patience you can't help but respect. You spot a carved apsara, half buried in vines, her smile defiant, despite the chaos. A parrot screeches overhead, and you mutter, "Quiet, I'm trying to explore." The temple's a maze, its corridors choked with greenery, yet every corner feels alive, whispering of monks who once walked here. You find a broken Buddha statue, its serene face cradled by roots, and wonder what prayers it heard before the jungle moved in. You push deeper, the path narrowing as figs and silk cotton trees tighten their grip. Bang Milia's layout is a maze with courtyards and galleries, tangled like a stone labyrinth. You find a fallen statue of Vishnu, its arms broken but serene, and wonder what ceremonies it once watched. The Khmer built this place to rival the heavens, but the rainforest had other plans, turning it into a green cathedral. You chuckle, thinking nature's probably a tougher critic than any king. The air's thick your sandals, gritty with dirt, and you're tempted to rest on a mossy ledge, but the ruins keep pulling you forward. You pass a doorway choked with vines, its lintel carved with faded lotuses, and feel the weight of centuries pressing down. The canals and berets you saw earlier fed this place, tying it to Angkor's watery pulse. You step over a root, hoping it's not a snake, and head deeper into Bang Milia's silent takeover, caught in the jungle's slow, relentless embrace. You're knee-deep in a muddy rice paddy, the warm water sloshing around your calves as you work alongside Khmer farmers under a relentless sun. It's the 12th century, and these fields are the lifeblood of the Khmer Empire, feeding Angkor's million-strong population with rice that's practically currency. Mainstream history credits these paddies with sustaining the largest pre-industrial city on Earth, a feat of agricultural grit that outdid most medieval societies. You're trying to plant rice stalks, your hands clumsy compared to the farmers' practiced moves, and you're pretty sure they're side-eyeing your technique. Here's the quirky tidbit some farmers sang to their crops, believing melodies made the rice grow faster. Imagine a whole field humming like a rural karaoke night. You grin, wondering if your off-key humming would get you kicked out. Historians still argue whether the Khmer's rice surplus was a triumph of planning or a strain that pushed the empire toward collapse. The air smells of wet earth and straw, and you hear the rhythmic slosh of water buffalo trudging nearby, their bells jingling faintly, like that buffalo orchestra you laughed about earlier. You're sweating buckets, your back aching from bending, and you're tempted to flop into the mud for a break. A farmer offers you a sip of palm wine from a clay jug, and you hesitate. City stomach versus ancient hospitality is a tough call. The paddies stretch endlessly, a patchwork of green and brown, fed by the canals you floated through before. These fields aren't just food. They're the empire's heartbeat, tying every temple and market to this muddy work. You slog to the edge of the field, where a small shrine sits its stone, worn but adorned with fresh lotus flowers. Farmers pause to leave offerings, a nod to the spirits who keep the rains coming. You spot a kid chasing a frog through the mud, his laughter cutting through the humidity, and you chuckle, thinking he's got the right idea. The jungle looms in the distance, a green wall that both protects and threatens these fields. You're starting to feel the rhythm of this life plant. Pray, harvest, repeat, but the weight of it hits you too. Feeding a city like Angkor takes more than muscle. It It takes faith water and a lot of luck. Your sandals are basically mud sculptures now, and you're half sure you'll never be clean again, but the paddy's quiet beauty, with its swaying rice and distant temple spires, keeps you grounded, pulling you deeper into the Khmer's world of sweat and sustenance. You're standing on the edge of a massive reservoir, the East Baray, its water stretching so far you'd swear it's a lake plotting to be an ocean. It's the 11th century, and the Khmer Empire's engineers built this beast to defy drought, storing monsoon rains to keep Angkor's fields and people watered year-round. Mainstream history calls the Barays, giant artificial reservoirs, a cornerstone of the Khmer's hydraulic genius, with the East Baray alone holding enough water to flood a modern city. You're watching workers repair the embankment, their hands caked in mud as they stack laterite blocks with eerie precision. Here's the quirky tidbit: some Barays had small islands with tiny temples where priests held rituals to bless the water. Imagine a holy rowboat commute. You smirk, picturing a monk paddling out with a soggy robe. Historians still argue whether the Barays were overkill, built more for royal bragging rights than practical need. The air smells of wet clay and faint lotus blooms, and you hear the splash of fish probably mocking your dry land existence. You step closer, the water lapping at your sandals, and notice how the Baray's surface mirrors the sky, turning clouds into a shimmering dreamscape. A kid nearby is tossing pebbles, trying to skip them, and you're tempted to join in, but your aim's probably as bad as your rice planting skills from the paddies. The embankment stretches for miles, a testament to the Khmer's stubborn refusal to let nature win. You spot a small shrine on the shore, its stone worn but adorned with fresh flowers, a nod to the spirits who keep the water flowing. You wander along the Baray's edge, dodging a cart piled with rice sacks, its driver whistling a tune that's probably older than the stones. The reservoir's calm is deceptive. It's a machine feeding canals, like the ones you floated through earlier, keeping Angkor's heart pumping. A heron glides low, its reflection perfect, and you chuckle, thinking it's showing off for the fish. The Khmer didn't just store water, they sculpted the landscape, bending rivers and rains to their will. You're starting to feel the scale of their ambition, like they were playing chess with the jungle itself. The sun's dipping, painting the water gold, and you're tempted to sit and watch the ripples, but the Baray's story pulls you onwards. Your sandals are still muddy from the paddies, but here by this man-made sea, you feel the Khmer's power in every drop. The jungle hums in the distance, a reminder that this water is borrowed and nature's always watching. You're creeping through to Prom, where the jungle's roots clutch the ruins like a possessive lover, twisting stone into a surreal dance of nature and decay. It's the late 12th century, and this temple built by Jayavarman VII for his mother once buzzed with Buddhist monks and royal rituals. Mainstream history dubs Taprom a monastic complex, its corridors alive with chants and offerings before the forest took over. You duck under a massive strangler fig, its roots draping over a wall like a giant's gnarled fingers. Here's the quirky tidbit: some trees here were left untouched by later restorers, as locals believed they housed spirits who'd get cranky if evicted. Imagine a tree ghost filing a complaint. You grin, picturing a spectral landlord waving a branch. Historians still argue whether Ta Prom's ruin was a deliberate neglect or the jungle's inevitable victory. The air smells of moss and damp stone, and you hear the faint drip of water echoing in a shadowed courtyard. You step carefully, avoiding roots that seem to shift underfoot, and spot a carved apsara, her smile half hidden by vines. A parrot screeches overhead, and you mutter quiet. I'm trying to explore. The temple's a maze, its corridors choked with greenery, yet every corner feels alive, whispering of monks who once walked here. You find a broken Buddha statue, its serene face cradled by roots, and wonder what prayers it heard before the jungle moved in. You push deeper, the path narrowing as figs and silk cotton trees tighten their grip. Taprom stones are crumbling, but their beauty's raw like a painting left in the rain. You spot a doorway, its lintel cracked, but carved with lotuses, and feel the weight of centuries pressing down. The Khmer built this place to honor the divine, but the jungle's rewriting the story one root at a time. You chuckle, thinking nature's probably a tougher critic than Jayavarman's court. The air's thick, your sandals gritty with dirt, and you're tempted to sit on a mossy stone, but the ruins keep pulling you forward. The canals and berets you saw earlier fed this place, tying it to Angkor's watery pulse. You step over a root, hoping it's not a snake, and head deeper into Taprom's tangled embrace, caught in a world where stone and forest share an uneasy truce. You're weaving through the bustling markets of Angkor, where the air hums with the chatter of merchants and the clink of bronze coins. It's the 12th century, and these trade routes linking the Khmer Empire to distant lands are alive with silk spices and stories from as far as China and India. Mainstream history says Angkor's markets were a hub of the Silk Road's Southeast Asian branch, funneling wealth into the empire's coffers. You're dodging ox carts piled with rice sacks, your nose hit by the sharp tang of fish paste and sweet palm sugar. Here's the quirky tidbit some traders used: carved wooden tokens instead of coins, each one shaped like a tiny elephant. Imagine haggling with a pocketful of mini pachyderms. You grin, picturing a merchant double-checking his elephant stash. Historians still argue whether these markets were the empire's economic backbone or a fragile link that crumbled under pressure. You pause by a stall where a woman weaves silk so fine it could pass through a ring, her hands moving like a hypnotic dance. The market's a riot of colors, red dyes from saffron green jade beads and gold-threaded cloth that makes your wardrobe feel like a sad thrift store haul. A kid darts past, chasing a stray chicken, and you mutter, "Good luck, little guy," as feathers fly. The air's thick with the scent of grilled fish and incense, and you're tempted to barter for a mango, but your modern wallet's useless here. The canals you floated through earlier keep this market fed, bringing goods from rice paddies and distant ports. You wander deeper, past stalls selling pottery and bronze bells, each one ringing with a different pitch. The Khmer didn't just trade goods, they traded ideas blending Hindu myths with Buddhist calm and Chinese craftsmanship. You spot a trader from India, his turban bright against the crowd, haggling over a bundle of cinnamon sticks. The market's pulse is infectious, pulling you along like the current of those canals. You chuckle, thinking these merchants could probably outnegotiate your boss. A monkey snatches a fruit from a nearby stall, and the vendor's yell sounds like it's been practiced for centuries. You're starting to feel the rhythm of this place, buy, sell, barter, repeat, but the jungle's hum in the dissonance reminds you this market's glory is tied to the empire's fragile balance. Your sandals crunch on the dirt path, and you keep moving, drawn by the promise of more deals and stories in Angkor's vibrant heart. You're trudging through a Khmer village, just outside Angkor's city walls, where the air smells of wood smoke and freshly pounded rice. It's the 12th century, and this is where the empire's heartbeat thrums in the daily grind of farmers, weavers, and kids chasing chickens. Mainstream history says these villages fed Angkor's urban sprawl, supplying rice and labor to keep the temples and markets humming. You're weaving between thatched huts, your sandals sinking into the soft earth as a woman kneads dough for flatbread on a clay stove. Here's the quirky tidbit: some villagers tied tiny bells to their kids' ankles to keep track of them, turning the village into a jingling playground. Imagine the chaos of a toddler symphony. You grin, picturing a parent sighing as the bells go wild. Historians still argue whether these villages were tightly controlled by the king's officials or ran on their own quiet rhythm. You pause by a communal well where women gossip while hauling water, their laughter cutting through the humid air. The scene's so lively, you almost forget the jungles just beyond its green fingers creeping close. A water buffalo lumbers past its bell, clanging like a grumpy metronome, and you mutter, "Same vibe, buddy." The village is a world of its own. Kids play with bamboo hoops, men sharpen sickles, and an old man weaves a fish trap with the focus of a monk. You're tempted to join in, but your city hands would probably botch the job. You wander past a small shrine, its stone worn but adorned with rice offerings, a nod to the spirits who keep the crops growing. The paddies you slogged through earlier are just down the path, their muddy expanse feeding this village and the city beyond. The Khmer here live by the seasons plant, in the monsoon harvest, in the dry prey always. You spot a girl braiding palm leaves into mats, her fingers flying, and wonder what stories she tells herself to pass the time. The village feels grounded, tied to the earth, in a way Angkor's grand temples aren't. You chuckle, thinking these farmers could probably outwork any city slicker, including you. The air's warm, heavy with the scent of straw and cooking fires, and you're starting to feel the slow pulse of this life. Your sandals are caked with village dirt now, but the simplicity here pulls you deeper, a quiet counterpoint to the empire's stone and splendor. You're standing in the heart of Angkor Wat, its towers looming like stone lotuses against a sky bruised with dusk. It's the 12th century, and this temple's design isn't just a pretty face, it's a cosmic map aligning with the stars to mirror the heavens. Mainstream history says Angkor Wat's layout reflects Hindu cosmology, with its central tower as Mount Meru, the mythical axis of the universe, surrounded by moats and walls mimicking oceans and mountains. You're tracing the outer gallery, its bas-reliefs of gods and battles stretching so far you'd need a week to see them all. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some stones are marked with tiny hidden symbols, maybe masons' signatures or lucky charms like ancient graffiti saying Kilroy was here. You grin imagining a carver sneaking his initials past the priests. Historians still argue whether the temple's cosmic design was pure devotion or a king's flex to claim divine status. The air smells of incense and warm sandstone, and you hear the faint chant of monks drifting from a distant chamber. You step into a courtyard, the stone cool under your bare feet, and notice how the towers align with the setting sun, casting shadows that feel deliberate, almost alive. A butterfly lands nearby its wings, a flicker of color, and you mutter fancy, meeting you in paradise. The Khmer built this place to bridge earth and sky every angle, calculated to make you feel small, yet part of something eternal. You're dodging a small crowd of pilgrims, their offerings of lotus flowers piling up at a shrine. You wander deeper the galleries, narrowing as you climb toward the central tower. The stairs are steep, a reminder that reaching the gods takes effort or a really good sense of balance. You spot a carving of Vishnu, his serene face watching over the chaos of carved battles below. The temple's symmetry is hypnotic, pulling you into its rhythm like those canals you floated through earlier. You chuckle, thinking the architects probably had nightmares about misaligned stones. The jungle hums outside its green pulse, a faint echo against Angkor Wat's precision. You're tempted to sit and watch the stars emerge, but the temple's cosmic pull keeps you moving each step a brush with the divine. Your sandals are dusty now, but here in this stone universe, you feel the Khmer's ambition to outshine the heavens themselves. You're lingering in the fading light of Angkor's bustling streets, where the first cracks in the Khmer Empire's grandeur are starting to show. It's the late 13th century, and the city's still a marvel, but whispers of decline are creeping in, like the jungle's roots. Mainstream history points to resource strain, too many temples, too many mouths, not enough rice, as a key reason Angkor's golden age began to wobble. You're walking past a market, quieter than the one you bartered in earlier, with fewer stalls and weary merchants counting their coins. Here's the quirky tidbit: some locals started burying small clay pots of rice under their homes for luck, hoping to fend off lean times. Imagine digging up your savings and finding moldy grains instead. You smirk, picturing a farmer's face at that discovery. Historians still argue whether overpopulation or mismanaged water systems tipped the scales toward collapse. The air smells of dust and fading incense, and you hear the creak of an ox cart, its driver muttering about a bad harvest. You're dodging piles of broken pottery relics of better days, and notice the canals nearby are silted, their flow sluggish compared to the clear waters you floated through before. A kid kicks a bamboo ball, his laughter a bright note in the growing gloom, and you mutter, "Keep smiling, kiddo." The temples still stand tall, but the crowds feel thinner, the energy less electric. You pass a small shrine, its offerings sparse, and wonder if the gods are feeling the pinch too. You keep moving the streets leading you past homes with sagging roofs and fields that look parched despite the berets' efforts. The Khmer's ambition, those towering temples and sprawling canals, might have stretched their luck too thin. You spot a woman weaving a basket, her hands steady, but her face tired, and you're struck by the quiet resilience here. The jungle's hum is louder now, as if it senses weakness ready to reclaim what you saw swallowing Taprom. You chuckle, thinking nature's probably got a better long-term plan than any king. Your sandals crunch on the dry path, and you're tempted to stop and soak in the fading pulse of Angkor's streets, but the story of decline pulls you deeper. The Empire's still fighting, but the weight of its own grandeur is heavy, and you're starting to feel it in your bones too. You're standing before Bante Sray, a petite temple glowing pink in the morning light. Its sandstone carvings so intricate they make Angkor Wat's walls look like rough drafts. It's the 10th century, and this gem dedicated to Shiva is the Khmer Empire's love letter to detail built not by a king, but by a high-ranking noble. Mainstream history calls Bante Sray a masterpiece of Khmer art, its miniature scale, packed with reliefs of gods, demons, and myths that could fit in a storybook. You're tracing a carving of a dancing Apsara, her smile so delicate you'd swear she's about to giggle. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some carvings include tiny monkeys playing instruments as if the artist snuck in a jungle jazz band for fun. You grin, imagining a sculptor chuckling over his monkey drummer. Historians still argue whether Bante Sray was a private shrine or a public flex of aristocratic wealth. The air smells of warm stone and faint wildflowers, and you hear the soft rustle of leaves as the jungle presses close. You're dodging a narrow path between shrines, each one a canvas of stories. Rama fighting demons, Shiva chilling with his bull. A lizard skitters across a lintel, and you mutter, "Don't photobomb the art, buddy." The temple's small size feels intimate, like a secret whispered in stone, but its beauty hits harder than any towering ruin. You spot a carving of a lotus, so precise it feels alive, and wonder how many hours went into one petal. You wander deeper, the pink sandstone warm under your fingers as you brush past a doorway. Bante Sray's details are hypnotic. Every inch tells a story from divine battles to quiet moments of devotion. You're tempted to sit and stare, but the carvings keep pulling you forward, each one a tiny world. The jungle's hum is softer here, as if it respects this place's delicate charm. You chuckle, thinking the trees are probably jealous of Bante Sray's glow-up. The rice paddies and canals you saw earlier fed this temple's builders, tying it to the empire's pulse. You step carefully, avoiding a loose stone, and feel the weight of artistry that outlasted its creators. Your sandals are dusty now, but here in this pocket of perfection, you're caught in the Khmer's obsession with beauty, wondering how something so small can feel so vast. You're trudging through the jungle, the distant trumpeting of war elephants shaking the air as you near a Khmer military camp. It's the 12th century, and the Empire's armies are gearing up their elephants, decked out in armor that makes your gym weights look like toys. Mainstream history says the Khmer used war elephants for both battle and prestige, trampling enemies and parading for kings like living tanks. You're dodging a pile of elephant dung fresh, unfortunately, and watching handlers coax a massive beast with handfuls of bananas. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some elephants were trained to carry giant parasols, shading generals like divas on a battlefield catwalk. You grin, picturing an elephant rolling its eyes at the extra flair. Historians still argue whether elephants were decisive in Khmer victories, or just expensive mascots that scared more than they fought. The air smells of sweat straw and the musky tang of elephant hide, and you hear the clank of bronze weapons as soldiers sharpen spears nearby. You're standing by a makeshift corral where a young handler scratches an elephant's trunk, earning a contented grunt. You mutter, "Lucky guy getting paid in trunk cuddles." The camp's alive with activity. Smiths hammer armor archers practice, and a cook stirs a pot of rice that smells better than it should. The jungle looms its green wall, a reminder of the canals and paddies you saw earlier feeding this war machine. You wander past a row of tethered elephants, their massive feet churning the mud like nature's bulldozers. The Khmer relied on these beasts to charge through forests, but you're not volunteering for a test ride. Those tusks look like they mean business. A soldier polishes a bronze shield, its surface etched with nagas, and you wonder if he believes the serpent spirits will protect him. The camp's energy is tense, like a storm brewing, but there's a rhythm to it. Train, eat, pray, repeat. You chuckle, thinking these elephants could probably outmuscle any modern tank, but parking would be a nightmare. Your sandals are caked with mud again, and you're tempted to sit and watch the elephants sway, but the camp's pulse pulls you deeper. The rainforest hums its sounds, blending with the clatter of war prep, and you feel the Khmer's power balanced on the backs of beasts and the edge of ambition. You're scrambling up a rocky path toward Phnom Kulen, a sacred hill where the Khmer Empire's spiritual roots dig deep into the jungle. It's the 9th century, and this remote outpost, far from Angkor's bustle, is where King Jayavarman II declared himself a god king, kicking off the empire's rise. Mainstream history credits Phnom Kulen as the Khmer's spiritual birthplace, its springs and stone carvings drawing pilgrims even today. You're brushing past ferns, your sandals slipping on wet rock, as you spot a carved linga in a stream bed, its edges smoothed by centuries of water. Here's the quirky tidbit. Locals believed the hill's springs could heal fevers, so pilgrims dunked themselves fully clothed, imagine soggy robes and no dry cleaners. You grin, picturing a priest shivering through a holy bath. Historians still argue whether Phnom Kulen's sanctity was genuine devotion or a clever way to legitimize Jayavarman's rule. The air smells of damp moss and faint incense, and you hear the trickle of sacred springs mixing with distant bird calls. You're dodging a narrow trail where a stone statue of Vishnu looms half hidden by vines, its smile calm despite the jungle's chaos. A monkey swings overhead, dropping a twig that nearly nails you, and you mutter, "Nice aim, buddy." The hill feels alive, its rocks and streams pulsing with stories of kings and gods. You pause by a waterfall, its spray cool against your sweaty skin, and wonder how many pilgrims stood here praying for miracles. You push deeper, the path winding past carvings of reclining Buddhas etched into boulders. Phnom Kulen's remoteness makes it feel like a secret, a place where the Khmer connected earth to heaven. You spot a small shrine, its stone worn but adorned with fresh flowers, likely left by modern pilgrims echoing ancient ones. The jungle's hum is softer here, as if it respects this sacred ground, unlike the creeping roots you saw at Taprom. You chuckle, thinking the hill's spirits probably have a better security system than Angkor's markets. Your sandals are soaked from a stream crossing, and you're tempted to sit by the waterfall, but the hill's quiet power pulls you forward. The canals and paddies you saw earlier started here in these holy springs. You step carefully, avoiding a slick rock, and head deeper into Phnom Kulin's sacred heart, caught in its ancient whispered promises. You're sitting in the cool shade of a temple cloister, the soft chants of Buddhist monks drifting through the air like a gentle breeze. It's the 13th century, and Angkor's spiritual life is shifting with Buddhism, taking root alongside Hindu traditions, filling temples with orange-robed monks and quiet prayers. Mainstream history notes that Jayavarman VII's push for Mahayana Buddhism reshaped the empire, turning places like Preah Khan into centers of meditation and study. You're watching a monk light incense before a Buddha statue, his movements slow as if time itself is pausing. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some monks kept sacred fish in temple ponds, believing their colors predicted the harvest. Imagine a monk squinting at a fish like it's a fortune teller. You grin, picturing a grumpy carp ruining someone's day. Historians still argue whether Buddhism's rise softened the empire's warrior spirit or strengthened its unity. The air smells of sandalwood and damp stone, and you hear the faint clink of a monk's alms bowl as he passes. You're tucked in a corner of the temple, its walls carved with lotuses and faded bodhisattvas, their serene faces glowing in the torchlight. A stray cat curls up nearby, purring like it's mastered Zen, and you mutter, "Teach me your ways, Fluffball." The chants are hypnotic, pulling you into a rhythm that feels older than the jungle itself. You're tempted to close your eyes, but the scene's too vivid. Monks shuffling in robes, their voices weaving a calm that contrasts the bustling markets you wandered through. You shift on the stone bench, feeling the coolness through your clothes, and notice a small offering of rice and flowers left by a pilgrim. The Khmer blended their gods, Hindu deities, mingling with Buddhist calm, and this temple feels like a crossroads of faith. You spot a young monk sweeping the courtyard, his broom kicking up dust that dances in a shaft of light. The canals and berets you saw earlier fed this place, bringing rice for offerings and water for rituals. You chuckle, thinking these monks probably had better work-life balance than you do. The jungle's hum seeps through the walls, a reminder that nature's never far even in this sacred space. Your sandals are still dusty from Phnom Kulin's trails, but here in the temple's quiet, you feel the Khmer's faith holding steady, a soft anchor in their fading empire. You're poking around the ruins of what might have been a Khmer library, its stone walls crumbling, but still whispering of lost knowledge. It's the 12th century, and Angkor's intellectual hubs, though rare, housed palm leaf scrolls filled with everything from star charts to epic poems. Mainstream history suggests the Khmer kept records of trade rituals and astronomy, though most scrolls rotted away in the jungle's damp grip. You're stepping over broken stone shelves, your fingers brushing dust that might have once been a scholar's masterpiece. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some scribes tied tiny bells to their brushes, believing the jingle warded off evil spirits. Imagine writing a tax record while sounding like a wind chime. You grin, picturing a scholar shushing his own pen. Historians still argue whether these libraries were elite only or shared with monks and merchants. The air smells of old stone and faint mildew, and you hear the rustle of leaves as the jungle creeps closer, like it's trying to read over your shoulder. You spot a carved naga, its serpent coils framing a doorway, and wonder if it guarded sacred texts or just looked cool. A bat flits overhead, and you duck, muttering, "Not my hair, buddy." The The library's quiet now, but you can almost see scribes, hunched over, scratching wisdom onto fragile leaves while candles flickered. The canals you floated through earlier brought rice to feed these scholars, tying their work to the empire's pulse. You wander deeper the floor, uneven with cracked tiles, and find a niche where scrolls might have rested. The Khmer recorded their world king's gods, even the rice yields you slogged through in the paddies, but the jungle's humidity was a ruthless editor. You're tempted to sit and imagine the stories lost here, but the ruins pull you forward, each shadow hiding a fragment of knowledge. You chuckle, thinking the jungle's probably a better librarian than you'd be keeping secrets locked tight. Your sandals crunch on debris, and you spot a faded carving of a lotus, maybe a scholar's doodle. The rainforest's hum is louder now, as if it's mocking the silence of this lost archive. You step carefully, avoiding a loose stone, and keep searching, drawn by the ghost of Angkor's forgotten words. You're deep in the jungle now, the air thick with humidity and the buzz of unseen critters as you navigate a trail that feels like it's daring you to get lost. It's the 12th century, and the Khmer Empire's rainforest is as much a foe as a friend, hiding dangers that kept even the boldest farmers on edge. Mainstream history notes that the jungle's wildlife, snakes, leopards, and crocodiles, shaped how the Khmer moved and built, forcing them to tread carefully beyond their city walls. You're stepping over a gnarled root, your eyes scanning for anything slithering too close. Here's the quirky tidbit some Khmer hunters wore, amulets carved with tiger claws, believing they'd scare off snakes. Imagine strutting through the forest with a claw necklace like it's high fashion. You grin, picturing a hunter checking his amulet like it's a lucky rabbit's foot. Historians still argue whether the jungle's dangers were exaggerated to keep villagers in line or a real threat to the empire's sprawl. The air smells of wet leaves and something sharp, maybe wild ginger, and you hear a rustle that makes your heart skip. Probably just a monkey, but your city brain screams cobra. You're dodging low branches, the path slick from last night's rain, and spot a small shrine tucked under a tree, its stone worn but holding a fresh lotus offering. The Khmer knew this forest was alive, weaving its spirits into the myths you saw carved at Bante Sray. You're tempted to pause, but a distant growl, real or imagined, keeps you moving. A beetle the size of your thumb scuttles past, and you mutter, "You win, buddy. I'm not messing with you." You push deeper, the trail narrowing as the jungle closes in its canopy, dimming the sun to a green haze. The paddies and canals you saw earlier relied on this forest's water, tamed yet never fully conquered. You spot a broken spearhead, half buried in the dirt, maybe dropped by a hunter centuries ago, and wonder what he was chasing. The jungle's a maze, each turn hiding potential traps, quicksand snakes, or just a root waiting to trip you. You chuckle, thinking the forest's probably got a better security system than Angkor's palaces. Your sandals are soaked caked with mud, and you're starting to feel like a guest who overstayed their welcome. But the jungle's pulse pulls you forward, whispering of the Khmer's delicate dance with this wild, untamed world. You're sneaking through the shadows of Angkor Thom's royal palace, where the air crackles with whispered plots and the scent of sandalwood. It's the late 12th century, and the sprawling complex built by Jayavarman VII is the nerve center of the Khmer Empire, buzzing with courtiers, priests, and scheming nobles. Mainstream history says Angkor Thom's court was a hotbed of intrigue where kings balanced power with divine rituals to keep rivals in check. You're slipping past a bronze gate, dodging a guard who's more focused on his rice wine than you. Here's the quirky tidbit: some nobles carried tiny jade figurines of Nagas, believing they'd sniff out betrayal. Imagine clutching a snake statue like it's a lie detector. You grin, picturing a paranoid lord side-eyeing his jade buddy during a council meeting. Historians still argue whether palace intrigues weakened the empire or just spiced up its politics. The air smells of incense and polished wood, and you hear the soft clink of anklets as a dancer glides by, probably headed to entertain the king. You're navigating a maze of corridors, their walls carved with lotuses and mythical beasts, each one glowing in the torchlight. A monkey scampers across a rooftop, dropping a nut that nearly clocks you, and you mutter, "Watch it, you little thief." The palace is alive. Servants bustle, priests chant, and you're trying not to bump into a noble who looks ready to start a feud over a wrong glance. You spot a throne room door, its carvings of Vishnu so grand you feel underdressed just standing there. You keep moving the stone floor cool under your sandals and catch a glimpse of a courtyard where advisors huddle their whispers, sharp with ambition. The Khmer kings ruled as gods, but this palace feels like a chessboard, every move calculated. You're tempted to eavesdrop, but a guard's stare makes you rethink that plan. The canals and markets you saw earlier feed this place, keeping the court fed and flashy, but the tension here is thicker than the jungle's humidity. You chuckle, thinking these nobles could probably outdrama any reality show. Your sandals are still gritty from the jungle trails, but here in the heart of power, you feel the Khmer Empire's pulse, strong but fragile, teetering on the edge of plots and divine promises. You slip into another corridor, drawn deeper into Angkor Thom's scheming, glittering world. You're hunched beside a Khmer artisan in a dusty workshop, the air thick with the rhythmic tap of chisels and the scent of warm sandstone. It's the 12th century, and Angkor's temples are rising their walls a canvas for stories that defy time. Mainstream history says Khmer sculptors crafted stone reliefs, Apsara's nagas, epic battles with a precision that rivaled any medieval art using tools and techniques passed down through generations. You're watching a carver shape a lotus, his hands steady as he chips away, making stone look softer than silk. Here's the quirky tidbit: some artisans mix rice paste into their mortar, believing it made the stones stickier for eternity. Imagine gluing a temple together with breakfast leftovers. You grin, picturing a sculptor sneaking a snack while mixing. Historians still argue whether these techniques were practical genius or steeped in ritual superstition. You step back, dodging a flying chip of stone, and catch the scent of burning oil from a nearby lamp. The workshop buzzes. Carvers banter, apprentices sweep dust, and a stray cat naps on a slab like it's the boss. You mutter, "Nice gig, kitty," as you sidestep a pile of shavings. The reliefs here are half finished, showing warriors and gods frozen mid-story, destined for temples like the ones you saw at Bantay Sray. The Khmer believed these carvings held power, linking their world to the divine, and you can feel the weight of that faith in every strike of the chisel. You wander past a row of stone blocks, each one waiting for its story. The artisans work fast, but their precision is unreal joints, so tight you couldn't slip a leaf between them. You spot a half-carved naga, its serpent coils curling like it's alive, and wonder how many hands touched it before it reached the temple. The jungle's hum seeps through the open walls, a reminder of the forest you trudge through its water, feeding the city that feeds this art. You're tempted to try carving, but your hands are better at scrolling than chiseling. You chuckle, thinking these artisans could probably sculpt your phone into a masterpiece. Your sandals crunch on stone dust, and the workshop's rhythm pulls you deeper, each tap a heartbeat of the Khmer's eternal ambition. You step outside the sun, warm on your face, and head toward the next temple, drawn by the promise of more stone stories. You're lingering in the quiet corners of Angkor Thom, where the influence of Khmer women queens, consorts, and nobles whispers through the stones, often overlooked but undeniable. It's the 12th century, and while kings like Jayavarman VII get the spotlight, women shaped the empire's heart in subtle, powerful ways. Mainstream history notes that queens like Jayadevi Jayavarman's sister funded temples, and led rituals wielding soft power through patronage and faith. You're standing by a small shrine, its carvings of apsaras glowing in the dawn light, and you notice a woman leaving an offering of rice and lotus flowers. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some noble women wore jade combs carved with tiny nagas, believing they brought wisdom. In court, imagine hair accessories doubling as royal life coaches. You grin, picturing a queen adjusting her comb before a big debate. Historians still argue whether these women held real authority or were figureheads for male agendas. The air smells of incense and warm earth, and you hear the soft clink of anklets as a group of women pass their woven baskets brimming with temple offerings. You're weaving through a courtyard, dodging a stray chicken that's wandered in, and mutter, "Stay out of politics, pal." The carvings around you dancers. Goddesses hint at women's roles, not just as muses, but as patrons who bankrolled places like Preah Khan, which you explored earlier. You spot a faded relief of a queen, her serene face commanding respect, and wonder what schemes she whispered in the palace halls you crept through. You keep moving the stone path, worn smooth by centuries of feet, and find a quiet alcove where a woman weaves palm leaves, her hands swift but calm. The Khmer didn't just revere women as symbols. Some led communities, oversaw rice fields like those you slogged through, and shaped the empire's spiritual pulse. The jungle's hum is faint here, drowned by the chatter of daily life, but you feel its presence tying this place to the canals and forests beyond. You chuckle, thinking these women could probably outsmart any modern boardroom. Your sandals are dusty, the air heavy with morning dew, and you're tempted to sit and listen to the stories these stones hold. But the legacy of Khmer women pulls you deeper, a thread of strength woven into the empire's fading tapestry, urging you to keep exploring their quiet power. You're wading through a sluggish, silt-choked canal, the water murky and barely moving under a gray sky. It's the late 13th century, and the Khmer Empire's once mighty water system, those canals and berets you marveled at earlier, is starting to falter, signaling the slow unraveling of Angkor's grandeur. Mainstream history points to the decay of these hydraulic networks as a key factor in the empire's decline, clogged by sediment and neglected maintenance. You're dodging a fallen branch, your sandals sinking into the muddy bottom as you watch a farmer try to clear debris with a weary sigh. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some locals tossed lotus seeds into canals, believing they'd purify the water. Imagine trying to fix a plumbing crisis with flowers. You grin, picturing a canal full of optimistic blooms. Historians still argue whether the canal's failure was due to environmental shifts or human oversight, like forgetting to clean the empire's arteries. The air smells of stagnant water and wet clay, and you hear the croak of frogs thriving in the mess. You're trudging along the banks where weeds have overtaken what was once a crisp stone edge. A kid nearby is fishing his bamboo pole bobbing, and you mutter, "So good luck catching anything but mud." The canal's like the one you floated through earlier, were Angkor's lifeline feeding rice paddies and temples, but now they're choking, and the city feels it. You spot a crumbling embankment, its stones scattered like a child spilled toys, and wonder how many workers tried to save it. You keep moving the path, slick and treacherous, as the jungle looms closer, its roots creeping into the water like it's claiming victory. The berets, once shimmering reservoirs, are shrinking, and the paddies you worked in are thirstier than ever. You pass a small shrine, its offerings sparse, as if even the spirits know times are lean. The Khmer's ambition, those temples and markets you wandered through, relied on this water, but nature's fighting back, and it's patient. You chuckle, thinking the jungle's probably got a better retirement plan than Angkor's kings. Your sandals are soaked caked with canal sludge, and you're tempted to stop and wring them out, but the story of decay pulls you deeper. The rainforest's hum is louder now, a reminder that the empire's pulse is fading tied to these failing waterways. You step carefully, avoiding a slick patch, and head toward the next sign of Angkor's slow surrender, caught in the weight of a city losing its grip. You're standing before a towering temple wall, its surface crawling with carved Naga serpents, their stone coils glinting in the fading light. It's the 12th century, and these mythical beasts, half snake, half divine, are everywhere in Khmer, art guarding temples and symbolizing the empire's cosmic power. Mainstream history says Nagas were central to Khmer mythology, representing water fertility and protection, linking the earthly city to the heavens. You're tracing a Naga scales, each one carved with such care it feels alive, ready to slither off the stone. Here's the quirky tidbit: some priests sprinkled rice wine on Naga carvings, believing it woke their spirits to guard the temple. Imagine a snake statue getting tipsy for duty. You grin, picturing a monk sneaking an extra sip for himself. Historians still argue whether Nagas were purely symbolic or tied to real rituals that shaped Khmer life. The air smells of warm sandstone and faint jasmine, and you hear the distant chant of priests, their voices blending with the jungle's hum. You're dodging a narrow path around the temple where Nagas frame every doorway, their hooded heads glaring like bouncers at a cosmic club. A lizard darts across the path, and you mutter, "Naga wannabe, huh?" The carvings are hypnotic, weaving stories of creation and chaos, like the ones you saw at Angkor Wat's cosmic galleries. The Khmer believed Nagas controlled the waters you waded through in those canals, tying myth to the empire's survival. You wander deeper, the temple's shadows lengthening as the sun dips. Each Naga seems to watch you, their stone eyes serene yet fierce. You spot a relief of a Naga battling a lion, a clash of myths frozen in time, and wonder what stories priests told to explain it. The jungle's creeping closer, its roots brushing the carvings like it's trying to join the tale. You chuckle, thinking the Nagas are probably laughing at the forest's slow invasion. Your sandals are gritty with temple dust, and you're tempted to sit and stare at the serpents, but their coiled energy pulls you forward. The patties and berets you saw earlier owe their life to these mythical guardians, or so the Khmer believed. You step carefully, avoiding a cracked stone, and head deeper into the temple, caught in the Naga's ancient slithering spell. You're weaving through the fading echoes of Angkor's markets, where the once vibrant trade routes you bartered in earlier are growing quiet, their stalls sparse under a heavy sky. It's the 14th century, and the Khmer Empire's Silk Road connections, which brought silk and spices from China and India, are unraveling as regional powers shift. Mainstream history suggests these trade routes were vital to Angkor's wealth, but their decline starved the city of goods and influence. You're dodging a half-empty cart, its driver haggling over a single bolt of cloth with a weary merchant. Here's the quirky tidbit: some traders started using broken pottery shards as IOUs when coins ran low. Imagine paying for rice with a ceramic IOU note. You grin, picturing a merchant double-checking his shard collection like it's a wallet. Historians still argue whether the trade routes faded due to external wars or internal mismanagement. The air smells of dust and fading incense, a far cry from the bustling market's jasmine and fish paste you sniffed before. You hear the creak of an ox cart, its wheels wobbling, and a kid kicking a pebble, his game the only lively thing around. You mutter, "Keep it up, kid. You're the entertainment." The market stalls are fewer now, their wares dull, faded cloth, wilted herbs. The canals you floated through, once bustling with goods, are sluggish, mirroring the market's decline. You spot a trader, polishing a jade bead, his face tired but stubborn, and wonder what he's holding on to in these lean times. You keep moving the dirt path, crunching under your sandals as the jungle's hum grows louder. like it's sensing the city's weakness. The Khmer's wealth flowed through these routes, but now the stalls feel like ghosts echoing the empire's fading pulse. You pass a small shrine, its offerings a single wilted flower, and feel the weight of a city losing its shine. You chuckle, thinking the jungle's probably got better trade deals with the monkeys. Your sandals are caked with market dust, and you're tempted to stop and watch the last traders pack up, but the story of decline pulls you deeper. The rice paddies and berets you saw earlier are struggling too, their water no longer enough to sustain this fading huff. You step carefully, avoiding a broken pot, and head toward the quieting heart of Angkor's trade, caught in the slow fade of its global reach. You're wandering through the silent ruins of Angkor, where the jungle's green fingers have tightened their grip, claiming temples and homes with a patience that outlasts empires. It's the 15th century, and the Khmer Empire's once mighty cities are crumbling their stones, swallowed by roots and vines in a slow, relentless takeover. Mainstream history suggests that by this time, Angkor was largely abandoned its people, fleeing south to new capitals as the jungle moved in. You're stepping over a collapsed wall, its carvings of apsaras barely visible under a blanket of moss. Here's the quirky tidbit: some locals left small stone offerings at temple gates, hoping to appease the forest spirits taking over. Imagine bribing a tree with a pebble. You grin, picturing a villager negotiating with a strangler fig. Historians still argue whether the jungle's advance was a symptom of collapse or an active force hastening it. The air smells of damp earth and decay, and you hear the drip of water echoing in a ruined courtyard, mixing with the hum of cicadas. You're dodging roots that twist like they've got a vendetta, and spot a broken Buddha statue, its serene smile half buried in vines, just like the ones you saw at Taprom. A monkey swings overhead, chattering like it's mocking your muddy sandals, and you mutter, "Laugh it up, pal." The temples you explored, Angkor Wat Phra Khan, are still standing, but here nature's winning wrapping stone in a green embrace that feels both gentle and ruthless. You push deeper, the path barely a suggestion, under tangled undergrowth. The Khmer built their empire to defy time, but the jungle's got a longer game plan, reclaiming what the canals and paddies once sustained. You find a fallen lintel, its Naga carving cracked but defiant, and wonder how many saw it before the forest took over. The air's heavy, your shirt clinging like a second skin, and you're tempted to sit on a mossy stone, but the ruined silence pulls you forward. You chuckle, thinking the jungle's probably got a better claim to these cities than any king ever did. Your sandals crunch on leaf litter, and the rainforest's pulse feels stronger now, a living force swallowing the Khmer's dreams. You step carefully, avoiding a slick route, and head deeper into the green, caught in the final act of Angkor's surrender to nature's patient siege. You're trudging through the jungle, your sandals caked with mud, as you follow in the footsteps of 19th century explorers who stumbled upon Angkor's lost cities, their ruins cloaked in vines and mystery. It's 1860 now, and the Khmer Empire's grandeur is a faded legend, rediscovered by adventurers like Henri Mouhot, whose sketches brought these temples to the world's attention. Mainstream history credits Mouhot and others with reviving interest in Angkor, though locals never truly forgot the ruins. You're brushing past ferns, your lantern flickering as you spot the silhouette of Angkor Wat's towers, half choked by strangler figs. Here's the quirky tidbit: some explorers swore the ruins were haunted, hearing ghostly chants at night. Imagine camping out and mistaking cicadas for spirits. You grin, picturing a spooked Frenchman clutching his notebook. Historians still argue whether these explorers exaggerated Angkor's lost status to boost their fame, or genuinely uncovered a forgotten world. The air smells of wet earth and old stone, and you hear the rustle of leaves blending with the distant croak of frogs. You're navigating a path littered with broken statues, their faces serene despite the centuries, like the Nagas you traced earlier. A bat flits overhead, and you duck, muttering, "Not my hat, buddy." The ruins feel alive, their stones whispering of the empire you've wandered through its markets, canals, and rice paddies, now swallowed by the jungle you saw reclaiming Bang Mealia. You pause by a carved Apsara, her smile glowing in your lantern's light, and wonder what Muho felt seeing her for the first time. You keep moving the jungle denser now, as if it's guarding Angkor's secrets. The explorers hacked through this same green wall, their journals describing temples as cities of the gods. You find a crumbled wall, its carvings of battles and gods half buried, and imagine the awe of those first sketches. The rainforest's hum is relentless, a reminder that nature's been the real caretaker here. You chuckle, thinking the jungle's probably a tougher curator than any museum. Your lantern casts shadows that dance like ghosts, and you're tempted to stop and sketch the ruins yourself, but the weight of discovery pulls you deeper. The Khmer's world, its waterworks, its faith, feels closer now, revived by these explorers' steps. You step carefully, avoiding a slick route, and head toward the next ruin, caught in the thrill of rediscovering Angkor's hidden heart. You're standing amidst the tangled ruins of Angkor, the jungle's hum a constant whisper as you ponder the enduring mysteries of why the Khmer abandoned their rainforest cities. It's the 15th century, and the once thriving empire you've wandered through its canals, temples, and markets has faded, leaving only questions etched in stone. Mainstream history suggests a mix of environmental strain, like the failing canals you waded through, and political upheaval drove the Khmer south to new capitals like Phnom Penh. You're brushing past a vine-choked statue, his face half lost to moss, and feel the weight of a city left behind. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some locals believe the Khmer fled because Naga spirits, like those you saw carved on temple walls, grew angry and cursed the land. Imagine packing up your empire because a snake god got cranky. You grin, picturing a king nervously eyeing a stone serpent. Historians still argue whether climate shifts like harsher monsoons or internal power struggles were the real culprits behind Angkor's fall. The air smells of damp earth and faint orchids, and you hear the drip of water echoing in a crumbling courtyard, blending with the cicadas' drone. You're dodging roots that twist across the path, each one a reminder of the jungle's takeover you witnessed at Taprom and Bang Mealia. A monkey chatters overhead, probably judging your sweaty stumble, and you mutter, "Keep your opinions to yourself, pal." The ruins are silent, but they hold clues: cracked reservoirs, overgrown paddies, quiet markets that hint at why the Khmer walked away. You pause by a fallen lintel, its lotus carving worn but stubborn, and wonder what final straw broke this empire's back. You keep moving the path, fading into undergrowth as the jungle tightens its grip. The Khmer's world was built on water and faith, from the berets you marveled at to the rituals you heard in temple cloisters, but something snapped. You spot a small shrine, its offerings long gone, and imagine the last priests leaving their chants, fading into the forest. The rainforest's pulse feels stronger now, as if it's reclaiming what was always its own. You chuckle, thinking the jungle's probably got a better memory than any historian. Your sandals are caked with mud, and you're tempted to sit and let the mysteries sink in, but the ruins pull you deeper, each stone a piece of the puzzle. The empire's fall is a riddle, and you're caught in its quiet, haunting spell, wondering what secrets the Khmer took with them as they left these cities to the green. You're sinking deeper into the jungle's embrace, the ruins of Angkor fading into a soft blur as the rainforest's whispers lull you toward sleep. It's centuries past the Khmer Empire's fall, and the stones you've wandered Angkor Wat's cosmic towers, to Prom's tangled roots. Bante Sreya's pink glow, are now quiet, cradled by the forest's patient arms. Mainstream history says the Khmer left these cities behind, perhaps driven by the failing canals you waded through, or the shifting trade routes you saw fade in the markets. You're sitting on a mossy stone, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth and faint lotus as the jungle's hum weaves a gentle tapestry of sound, cicadas droning leaves, rustling a distant stream, trickling like a forgotten lullaby. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some modern locals leave small stones at temple gates, believing they carry dreams to the ancient spirits. Imagine the Nagas you traced earlier, delivering bedtime stories. You smile, picturing a serpent spirit tucking you in. Historians still argue whether the Khmer's departure was a slow drift or a sudden exodus, but the jungle doesn't care, its roots wrapping the past in a green cocoon. You hear a soft rustle, maybe a monkey settling for the night, and murmur, "Sweet dreams, pal." The ruins feel like a memory. Now they're carvings of apsaras and nagas fading into the dusk of your mind. You're tempted to lie back, let the forest's rhythm carry you off, but the stones hold you, their stories lingering like a warm blanket. The patties, berets, and rituals you explored tie together here in this quiet moment where the Khmer's world meets the jungle's eternal pulse. You chuckle softly, thinking the forest probably the best storyteller of all, keeping Angkor's secrets safe. As you lean against the stone, its coolness soothes your tired limbs, and the jungle's sounds grow softer, slower like a heartbeat winding down. The air feels lighter now, the humidity easing as night settles in, wrapping you in a calm that mirrors the monk's chants you heard long ago. Your eyelids grow heavy, the ruins blurring into a dreamscape of temples and rivers where the Khmer's ambitions dissolve into the forest's gentle sway. Let the cicadas sing you to sleep, their drone a thread connecting you to the ancient world you wandered. The jungle's got you now, its whispers promising rest, carrying you away from stone and struggle into a quiet, endless night.